Go ahead and get started. Welcome to the first of the Lunch and Learn series for Love for Lawrence this spring of 2023. My name is Stony Dvornik. I'm the director of Love for Lawrence, and I'm so glad that you're joining us today for this really pertinent and important topic. I want to introduce you to Whitney Goodman. Whitney is a marriage and family therapist licensed in the state of Florida. She has an online practice with collaborative counseling. She was educated at Tulane University and then University of Miami for her graduate degree, and she lives right here in the Tampa Bay area along with her extended family. So she's also a wife and a mother. And Whitney, thank you so much for being with us today and speaking about how mental illness affects family members.
Thank you so much for having me. Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. I am going to be talking to you, like Stony said, about mental health and the family. I'm going to start by sharing with you a little bit about how mental health struggles can impact the entire family, and then we'll move into discussing a lot of different strategies, tools, scripts, and things that you can use. In the interest of time, I'm definitely going to try to move through the presentation, but if any questions come up for you, please feel free to send them in, and I will definitely leave time at the end for some questions. So we often think about mental health issues as happening to an individual, but they really impact the entire family, and we all play a role in how those issues are managed and even in worsening them or helping them improve. And when a family member is struggling with mental illness, anybody who has been in a family system where this is happening, you may realize that it becomes the family's primary focus. It's often the thing that takes the most attention, the most energy, and it can kind of start to feel like everyone in the family is revolving around this issue for better or worse. One of the biggest conflicts that I see is that family members often have really different perceptions of the problem and maybe even different potential solutions. And because managing mental health issues and mental illness is often so much more complicated and difficult than a typical physical health diagnosis, there can be a lot of conflict in this area, and it can become a huge stressor for families outside of just the actual mental health condition. And so it's really normal for family members, even those who are not dealing with mental health issues themselves, to experience really difficult feelings like helplessness, frustration, loss, guilt, and even compassion fatigue when it comes to trying to be helpful and understanding to the other person. So in families, there is something called family homeostasis. And this is something that every family has, whether you are a dysfunctional family or a typical healthy family. And every family has their own expression of everything being fine or their own baseline. And this doesn't necessarily mean that everything is great in the family. It just means that everything is operating the way that it normally does. And it's the way that the family has learned to operate. And when you have a family member that is struggling with their mental health, the family will often shuffle around in their roles to recreate that homeostasis or that feeling of things being fine. And this is when we will see people move in to different roles that are really hard to come out of or to change. There are 6 roles that family members tend to take on that help maintain dysfunction in a family. And I want to mention that not every role will be observed in every family, and one member can play multiple roles or alternate roles with different people. But these are different roles to kind of take into consideration if you are in a family system where there is someone who is really struggling with their mental health or you have a history of mental illness. The first role is the focus, which is also often called the addict, but I like to use the focus just because sometimes there is no addiction in the family. And this is the person that is going to typically be labeled with a diagnosis or be seen as the problem, right? And I'll walk you through an example so you can see how these different roles pop up. But let's say that there is a family with 6 members. We've got mom, dad, and 4 children. And maybe dad has a temper. He tends to yell and throw things when he's upset. He has anger management problems. And mom always steps in and tries to calm him, make sure everything's perfect so that he doesn't snap, right? So we can see here that dad's the focus and mom is the caretaker. Then we have maybe the oldest child that gets straight A's. They have a lot of friends in the community. They are the hero, and the parents may often refer to them as like their success story. You may then have a second child who's got some issues with addiction, constantly getting in trouble, and dad is really focused on this kid's behavior. He gets very upset with this child, and maybe that's when his anger tends to come out. Everyone in the family is often talking about how this child needs to get their life together. If they were better, then dad wouldn't get so angry. And it really becomes about this person now being the problem, the scapegoat, the person who needs to change in order to fix the family. Then you have a third child that after dad gets angry, they make a lot of jokes, they poke fun at his temper, and they're more of the mascot, trying to detract or distract from the issue. And then the fourth child might spend a lot of time in their room. They try to fly under the radar and avoid the chaos. And we can see here that in this dynamic, it might be very tempting to just say, if dad stopped getting angry and the second child improved, our family would be perfect. But everybody really needs to change in this family system in order for things to improve. And that's what I really want you all to consider when we're talking about mental illness, mental health issues in relation to the family, is that often it's so easy to just look at one person and say they're the problem, they're sick. But we have to look at how the family is contributing as a whole to the dynamic. And that doesn't mean that it's anyone's fault that someone in your family is struggling with their mental health. It just means that all of us can do something to help improve the situation and improve our own lives. So if you're someone that identifies with the focus, if the focus prioritizes their healing, things in the family might shift. If the caretaker stops enabling, things will have to change and shift. If the hero stops covering it up, things will shift. If the scapegoat stops taking the blame, there will be a shift. And if the mascot calls it what it is, things might change. And so when you look at any type of change or shift in the family, it's very common for there to be conflict, chaos, pain, but those are the things that we have to go through in order to experience some change. Now, one of the biggest things that I hear from family members who are supporting someone who is struggling with their mental health is that supporting someone who is struggling is difficult. And I find that this is something that people don't want to say out loud because the focus is really always on the person that's struggling with their mental health. And it can feel kind of selfish or wrong to say, like, this support is difficult, but it is. I mean, I'm a therapist and I still struggle sometimes with supporting people that are close to me because we care about them. We're worried. We want things to get better. And so I want to shift into talking to you all about how you can be a better support system and how you can also make this support feel easier and lighter for you. So it's so hard because we want to fix it, right? We're uncomfortable, or we don't have the tools or resources. These are the 3 biggest things that I come up against. And I want to tell you a little bit about what happens when someone is emotionally dysregulated. Okay, so if you look at this chart here, this is something known as the window of tolerance. It was developed by Dr. Dan Siegel. And on the 2 poles of this, we have hyperarousal and hypoarousal. And when you're supporting someone who is struggling, or you can even apply this to yourself, you will notice that they probably tend to go into either one of these poles, right? So hypoarousal at the bottom is somebody who really shuts down. They're out of it, like their body's there, but they're usually frozen and numb. And on the other pole, we have someone that's really anxious, out of control. It's more of that fight on the fight or flight spectrum. Okay. And on either sides of this window of tolerance, we have dysregulation. And what you can start to think about is like, what does it feel like in my body when I start to get dysregulated? What is it like for my loved one when they start to get dysregulated? And the more attuned you become to these signs, the more likely you can intervene with yourself and with others before they go totally to these other poles. So, do you feel like jumpy, shaky, butterflies in your stomach? Do you feel like you're having trouble focusing and really getting in tune with what some of those signs are for emotional dysregulation? And this is a great thing to work on with a therapist, like to kind of try to break down, what do I normally feel? And asking your loved one, like when they are in a calm state, not when they're overwhelmed, like, what does it start to feel like for you when you start to get anxious, when you start to get overwhelmed? What are some signs that I can look out for in the moment? And it's great to have a sense for you and the other person of what that looks like. So the best helpers have boundaries and they don't try to do it all. And this is something that I really see people, especially parents, siblings of people with mental health issues, fall into. And so I really like to share this chart by Rachel Naomi Remen. She did a wonderful paper on the difference between fixing, helping, and serving. Okay. And so a lot of us tend to live in this fixing area where we see people as being broken, they need to be repaired. It's like, you need me to get better. You may have even worked with therapists who were like this, that really tried to like always be the expert and not listen to you. And this is an area that if you're trying to help someone, you can feel very drained, experience a lot of burnout, and it stops you from really listening and understanding to what the other person is feeling. Okay. This helping is better. It's in the middle, but it's still seeing the person who is struggling really as weak and needing of assistance. You're the only one that can help them, and there's still a really big power differential there. What I would like you to try to stay in is more of this serving column over here. And the way that that's different is that it's you and the other person saying, we are both human beings. We both struggle and we are both experts on our own experience. And even though I'm a therapist who has, academic expertise in areas, I still think it's so important to try to meet with people from this space of like, you are the expert on your life, and I'm here to help guide you and help you with the tools that I have and that I know. We want to be very cautious about making people who are struggling with their mental health feel inferior, making them feel less than, making them feel weaker, because they already tend to feel in that position as a symptom of what they're dealing with, right? And so the goal is to empower and to say, I'm here to be your partner, to serve you, to be a guide. And when you're in this place, you'll notice that it feels so much more rewarding and satisfying, and you feel more connected with your humanity rather than trying to kind of tug this person into like, you have to do it my way if you want to get better. Because I think all of us know that doesn't tend to feel very good. The other important thing to remember is that sometimes you will not be able to help, and that is okay. And I know this is a really difficult thing for me to accept, especially as a therapist with my own family members. Like I can tell you, or my own friends, I'm not able to help them all the time. And that might be because I don't have the resources, they don't want the help, I don't have the capacity to help them. And so that's where I wanted to give you a couple of scripts that you can use in moments where you may not be able to help. And I have shared these scripts in a lot of different ways with many different groups of people. And I think sometimes there's a reaction of like, oh my gosh, I could never say this to someone because you are afraid to set a boundary. And that's the really delicate part of working with people who are struggling with their mental health, that I would say I never want you to set a boundary when someone is in crisis. So if someone contacts you and they're saying, I'm having suicidal thoughts, something like that, that's not a good time to say, I can't help you, right? We want to try to implement these boundaries at a time when someone is calm, when you're having a normal conversation, and you can even be reflective. There are also situations where you are actively not the best person to help this person. And if you try, you are getting in the way of them actually seeking the right resources that they need. So a person might be in a position where they really need a higher level of care than speaking to a friend. And that's when I think you would want to go back to some of these, right? Where I love you and I care about you, but I know that I am not the best person to help you with this. And I really think that we should meet with a professional, we should meet with a therapist, we should go to the hospital, and I am happy to help guide you through that. There are also a lot of situations where people might be relying on you in crisis and it's keeping them stuck. And so really trying to teach the people in your life that like, you can always call on me, but when I'm at work, sometimes I'm not going to be able to answer the phone every time. Here are the exact times when you can contact me, and really empowering that person to take control of what they're going through. The other thing that I want to share with you is how to become a safe person for someone to reach out to when they're dealing with mental health struggles. I teach a lot of people the signs of a safe person, but there's also people like you who may want to become a safe person for someone else. And so in that situation, you really want to try to refrain from judgment or criticism when someone shares how they're feeling with you. So really just trying to validate it. That sounds hard. That sounds difficult. Asking how they prefer to be supported. This goes back to that serving piece, that you might have an idea in your mind about this great advice that you want to give, exactly how you can be supportive, but it may not be what that person wants or needs in that moment. Listening is so powerful. Literally just sitting there, nodding your head, saying, yeah, I'm listening, can be so much more impactful than like the most inspirational line that you think you want to give to someone. Apologizing when necessary is so big, like being someone that can admit when they've messed up, that can admit when they did something wrong, that can make you such a safe person to someone else. Setting boundaries when you need to. Again, you don't have to feel like you have to be this totally like boundaryless, open person to be helpful. Learning to tolerate the distress of others is huge. So getting in touch with that window of tolerance that I mentioned and the signs of distress that you have, working on your own triggers and being able to say, I am feeling so dysregulated right now and so overwhelmed that I know I cannot be helpful to you. Can I take 5 minutes, to help myself calm down, to help myself get back to a regulated place? Because we all know that we cannot be helpful when we're not feeling calm or we're not feeling secure with our own experience. And that can make you safe, that that person knows you're working on yourself to get yourself there. So offering support is not as complicated as you think. It really is. I want you to always come back to these. Show compassion, offer validation, seek understanding, and back it up with action. And I'm going to give you a couple of other ways that you can do that. So try to avoid platitudes or phrases like, don't worry, you'll be fine. You have so much to be grateful for. Don't cry. And here are some different things that you can say instead of like, don't cry or any of these positive platitudes. It would be, it's okay to cry. I get why you're upset. Using physical touch with permission, saying, I'm here for you. I'm glad you feel comfortable sharing this with me. And if anybody would like access to these, I'm happy to share this after as well, because I know there's a lot of them here. Here's some other options of, instead of saying, don't worry, you'll be fine. You can even say, and 9 times out of 10 people prefer this, of you saying, I don't know what to say right now, but I really want to help you through this. I really want to be there for you. Being honest is so much better than trying to be overly positive or giving somebody like a platitude or a reassurance that everything is going to be fine when you don't know that and they don't believe that. So really trying to come back to this place of just like, what is this like for you? How are you feeling about this? And letting them share. So the other thing to remember is that sometimes questions can be really hard for someone to answer when they're feeling dysregulated. So asking like, what do you need? What's wrong? How can I help? What happened? Why are you acting like this? Like, can be very overwhelming. And if you ask a question and they're not able to respond, or they're just saying, I don't know what's wrong, that's a sign for you to move back into just validation and trying to sit with the person and really coming back to the place that like sometimes it's hard to answer those things when you're not in that place. I just said this, but I want to reiterate that when someone is in crisis, it's okay to say some of these things. And I will say this is one of the most popular images that I have ever posted online, because I think so many people really resonated with this idea that it's so damaging to pretend that you have all the answers when someone is in crisis, and just telling them, I'm not going anywhere is so, so powerful, because that's what people are scared of. They're not usually scared of the event. They're scared of going through the event by themselves. And so trying to just, again, reassure them. So I see there's some questions coming in, and I will definitely get to these after. All right. So the next thing I want to just touch on briefly is, how to help, how to get someone help. I think this is really difficult. And the first thing that you want to check in on is this person really in danger? I think a lot of times we're not sure like what level of care we should be providing for this person. And so these are the things that are really signs of danger for me as a therapist, would be hallucinations, a desire to harm themselves or others, suicidal thoughts, not being able to care for themselves, so not taking care of their basic needs for an extended period of time, showering, brushing their teeth, etc., and substance use. If you're seeing a big increase in substance use, or the person has had a radical change, these are things that you need to, if you see these in a person that you are concerned about, that would be a time to say, okay, this is escalating, this is getting worse. Evaluating suicide risk. I think everyone should feel comfortable being able to ask questions about suicide with their loved ones. I think there's a fear that if you bring this up, you're going to intensify the feeling or make them think about it more. That is a myth, and it's good to ask. It can take the scariness out of it. And so some of the common signs that there is an increase in suicidality would be, talking about it a lot more, planning and gathering, the person really isolating themselves, having a lot of mood swings, feeling trapped, again, the substance use, a big change in their normal routine. And so these are things that are just really good to look out for and to be aware of. I know that the organization provides a lot of education on like mental health first aid. And these are some of the things that you would definitely be looking out for, right? And the same way that we train people in CPR, these are just good signs to know so that you can see whether for you or any of your loved ones are going through something. Okay, so what are your options if you recognize these signs? One of the biggest things to remember is that sometimes people will say, like, can you keep this between us? I don't want to tell anyone. And I would really recommend not to ever keep suicidality a secret from an important person in that person's life who may be able to get them help. You obviously do not need to go and share this with people, but really trying to make it like, I care about you and I want to make sure that you get the help that you need, whether that's disclosing this to a therapist, someone that they live with, etc. You don't want to leave this person alone if you feel like they're in imminent danger. And you do want to definitely call 911 or take the person to the emergency room if you feel like they're absolutely in danger in that moment. There are also different suicide hotlines that you can call and different resources like that. I think there are pros and cons to all of these different resources. And at the end of the day, it's really coming back to what is the best way for me to keep this person safe. And it's going to depend again on the age of that person, who they live with, if they have a therapist, what diagnoses they have, etc. All right, so the best ways to support someone who is talking about suicide would be definitely to encourage them to get help, encourage them to communicate with you. The biggest thing you want to do is keep those lines of communication open. Asking them questions like, how can I help? What do you think would make you feel better? Is there anything that you're hopeful about? What we're trying to always get the person to do is see hope in the future. Removing potentially dangerous items from the home can be helpful, encouraging them to avoid substances. And again, just trying to be supportive with a lot of those ways that I mentioned earlier. Another thing that you can do is help someone find a therapist, which I always recommend, using your resources in the community, finding out what's most important to that person and helping them with the parts that are difficult for them. So if they are overwhelmed about finding a therapist, asking them like, what feels overwhelming for you? Because maybe I can help you. I can make a list. I can send out the emails for you. I can be on the call with you, like trying to find what's hard for them. And also leading by example is huge. Telling the other person, I'm going to start going to therapy. This is the therapist I'm seeing. This is how therapy was helpful for me. I always tell people this is like the number one way you can help people take their mental health seriously is for you to do it yourself. Couple of reminders I wanted to leave you with is that you cannot help everyone. It's okay to set boundaries. Sometimes the things you do to help people will make them upset. And this is a really difficult thing about helping someone, especially when they are having severe, persistent mental health symptoms that cause them to have delusions, hallucinations, things like that. People have to engage in their own healing and treatment. And sometimes as family members, we get to this place where you really have to say, I'm here for this person. I love them. I support them, but I have to wait for them to want to take the next step in this process. I also find that a lot of family members really blame themselves for the mental health issues of their loved ones. And mental illness and mental health diagnoses are so multifactorial that it's not your fault. I started this off by saying, we all play a role in the healing. We all play a role in improving, but we also have to remember that we can't cause these things all on our own. And then coming back to always empathy, compassion for myself and for them, and boundaries. This is the last slide I'm going to show you. I think this is a great chart of things that you should do and things that I would advise you to try not to do when someone is struggling, because I think that they're historically unhelpful. I think this would be a great slide, definitely, if you want like a takeaway from this to take a screenshot of and save. I think it can be very helpful to come back to. Great, well, I'm happy to answer any questions. Stony, would you like me to just go off the questions that were sent in, or do you all typically read them?
Sure. Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and take a look at those questions, and then I have
Yeah.
one as well.
Sure. Great. All right. So someone is asking about the tripod of remedies to deal with a family member with mental health issues like medication, therapy, and self-care. Can one exist without the other, especially if you have a family member who is refusing or simply feels like they can't handle one of those areas? So with a lot of diagnoses, we're going to see that those three things are, when they're paired together, have the best outcomes, right? And then there are going to be certain diagnoses where medication seems to be the most helpful, therapy seems to be the most helpful. I think self-care falls in line with both of those. I would say that it's best to start really small and take baby steps, especially when someone is feeling overwhelmed with the process or is refusing. I have started working with clients who, were being told to do so many different things. And these are people that were not really able to even brush their teeth consistently, shower consistently, and get out of bed. And when I hear that, I'm thinking, that's where we got to get to before we do anything else. I cannot conceive of someone engaging regularly, even in medication or maybe even therapy, until they get to that point. And so I always want family members to look at, what is the state of my loved one's life? And what would it look like to just do 5 or 10% more than they're doing right now? And that's where we need to start. Because sometimes in our desire to help them, to get them relief and to make things better, we put way too much on them, and it ends up backfiring because it feels overwhelming and impossible to them. And I think we can all relate to like failing a goal in that way, that like if you tell yourself, I'm going to go to the gym 7 days a week, and you're not going to the gym at all right now, you might do that for like a week and then you end up failing. And so thinking about how we can slowly infuse some of that, and also figuring out which one of these feels the hardest for them. For some people, medication is easy or self-care is easy. It's the therapy piece that's hard, but like really trying to ask them, like, what would it be like to just work on this area? All right. And then someone asked about getting access to the slides. I can definitely share these with you all. I don't mind that at all. I can email them over to you. All right.
How would you like them to handle that? Go to your website to leave a request, or put their email in the chat box?
Yeah, if you want to give me your emails, or if you have, I don't know if you have all the emails of everyone that signed up. If you can give me that, I can also just send it out. Whatever is easiest.
Okay, I think if you if you're here on the call and you'd like access to these slides, if you will email contact@loveforlawrence.com, and that 4 is the Roman numeral 4, so it's loveivlawrence.com, contact at, and then I will have your email address and we can get you the slides. There's a question, Whitney, about the correlation between physical health and mental health. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think physical health and mental health are 100% related and tied together. We were talking about this before we hopped on, that it's always recommended that anybody with any new or recurring mental health symptoms see their primary care physician or their doctor first before assuming that it's a mental health problem. I know I've worked with countless people that have been dealing with depression, anxiety, and we find out they're extremely deficient in vitamin D, or they have a hormonal issue. And I always tell people, like, there's a lot we can fix with therapy and self-care and all this stuff, but we can't fix some of that physical stuff through that. And so you definitely want to rule any of that out before pursuing psychiatric medication or any other type of mental health intervention, because you might not be treating the root of the problem.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
There were some specific questions about, say, the correlation between sepsis and mental illness, and also concussion, which is going to be a topic next month for us, but I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think any type of physical health issue that impacts the brain, like a concussion, like sepsis, can absolutely result in mental health issues after the fact. I know with concussions, we definitely see a higher rate, possibly, of like anger or rage or lack of impulse control. There can be memory loss with things like sepsis or concussions. That's again another area where I think if you have experienced a disruption to your life, whether that's through your physical health or your mental health, it's always good to kind of stop and think like, what have I experienced lately? Let's go all the way back and ask myself, when was the first time I started experiencing these symptoms? If it was after sepsis, if it was after a concussion, or you have any history like that, you're gonna want to check in on those issues first before making any type of diagnosis. That's also a good way for any loved ones to think about their family members' history of like, what have they experienced over the last even 2 or 3 years that could have led to this, marked change in their behavior or their mental health.
Mhm. And then, unfortunately, there's been another suicide in our local Clearwater Bel Air community this week. So I wonder if you have any advice for these community members when they are approaching or talking with the family, encountering the family that has lost someone to suicide.
Yeah, one of the biggest things I see with suicide loss is that people are often like scared to provide comfort in the same way that they would if it was a loss like to cancer or something else. There's still this stigma involved. And I think we have to remember that those people are just as like deserving and in need of our care as we would with any other type of loss. And so going back and reflecting on like, what have I done for other people, when they've lost someone in their life? And one of the best ways I think is showing up through action, right? And just doing things for people, whether that's dropping off a meal, checking in and saying, you do not need to respond, but I want you to know that I love you and I care about you and I'm thinking about you, depending on the context of the relationship, and validating how difficult this type of loss is, but also showing people that have been through that you're not afraid of that type of grief. I think people who have been through suicide loss can feel this sense of like, it's taboo for me to talk about. People are scared to talk about it. They don't want to talk about it because they're afraid that it could happen to them. There's this contagion element that I think we have to really just remember that like this is so difficult. And what would I want if I was in this situation? I would want people to treat me like I had just lost someone, important to me.
Yeah, yeah. One thing I hear is don't be afraid to mention the name of the person who's died.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's one thing that I hear all the time from people is like, they love hearing positive, good memories about that person after loss, and keeping that person's memory alive for the family can be really impactful.
Yeah, yeah. And I love how you said to treat it like it was a death from some other cause, just like cancer. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, same thing, that practical help, like
exactly.
bringing a meal, running an errand for them.
Yep,
Mhm. Very good.
exactly.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Um, Whitney, I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. If I could share well, first, if you'll share your screen with your contact information,
Yes, absolutely.
and
That'd
then
be
turn
good.
the host capabilities back to me, because I'm going to tell everyone about the Lunch and Learn for next month. So here's how you
Yes.
can contact Whitney. Um, her website, her email, and then on social media. And then also, if you would talk about your book for a moment.
Yeah, you can still hear me, right? I just made you the host.
Yes.
Yes, I wrote a book called Toxic Positivity. There's a lot of resources in there for how to support yourself and others that are dealing with mental health issues. And then it's also just a great book to teach you about managing your emotions. And if you guys have any other questions or ever need recommendations for therapists in the community, please don't hesitate to reach out to me.
Thank you so much. Your tips have been
Yeah.
concise and so on point. And I feel comfort in what you said about making sure that you're equal, that you're not superior to the person, that there's not something wrong with them, that you're just two human beings trying to comfort each other and solve a problem. Yeah, so thank you so much, Whitney, for being with us today. Next
Thank
month, we're going
you.
to be